UFC 311 to talk about this co-main event because this one has so much heat behind it. We've got Merab Dvalishvili, who is the champion. Of course, he became the champ earlier this year when he defeated Sean O'Malley, taking on Umar Nurmagomedov, who is the challenger on Saturday night. These two hate each other, safe to say. I mean, he just feels, in Merab's terms, that this is his, undeniable destiny, but he doesn't believe that Umar has climbed through the ranks in the manner in which he had to. Anthony, there is a lot of emotion here. We saw it in December at their press conference. We saw it a little bit yesterday. Whenever we do interviews with Merab, he's very offended by a lot of the things that have happened here. How does that emotion come into play, if at all?
He is very upset that he feels Umar didn't have to take the path that he took. And he's right. He should be. He didn't take that path at all. If we're talking about strength of schedule and the road that each one of those guys had to go down, Merab's is by far harder, by far longer. I don't know that that's Umar's fault, though. He did find himself in a position a lot of times where most of those guys were unwilling to take that fight and put themselves in that position. I think that his last win does trump a handful of wins that Merab has. It is a very, very good win. I hold a win over Corey Sandhagen very, very high.
Yeah.
But emotionally, Merab seems to fight very well when he is offended and when he has something to prove, when it seems like it's him against the world. He tends to perform better that way. So I'd imagine that the people around him and his team probably continue to push him in that direction. Let's not calm him down. Let's not focus him in on the details. He doesn't really fight super detail-oriented anyways. He's kind of just a rabid dog in there. I think just let him keep doing that and feel the way he feels.
Well, an objection, by the way, here, it's a little bit philosophical. If you could only be one, would you rather be undefeated or would you rather be world champion? And it's very interesting resumes. We have a guy who's undefeated, who's a 3.25 to 1 favorite over the reigning world champion, who, by the way, has been undefeated in his last 11 contests. I mean, this is a wildly interesting match.
Because I asked John Wood about it. I said, well, how do you feel about the timeline? And he said, well, listen, the goal is to get here. I don't care if it takes 6 weeks to get here or if it takes 12 weeks to get here. What matters is that we got there. And he said, we got to where we needed to go. He felt fine with the timeline. But how do you guys feel? He feels like, I would have liked to have more time to fight a wrestler. I would have liked more preparation. But I'm the champ. I'm going to do this.
Well, if you can't get there in 6 weeks, you're not going to get there in 12. And that's just that's my philosophy. I'm sure that a lot of people have different opinions on that. But he's not going to learn anything wrestling-wise that's going to change the outcome of a lot of those positions. He can get better at some of the details there, but he's not going to learn this one move that's going to change everything he's going to do. I think sometimes, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, I think you want more time to let it digest what you're going to have to get yourself into, because a fight with Umar is not an easy fight to be in. Merab fights the hardest style possible as well. He doesn't have crazy power in his hands. He doesn't have a whole bunch of submissions. He knows every time he goes in there, he's likely to be in there for 25 minutes. Sometimes it takes a while to digest that and just get yourself prepared for that.
And a couple of things. If I can just remind you guys of the timeline, but there was a card at the end of last year that was simply referred to as Sphere. On that card of O'Malley versus Merab, it was very clear the number one contender will be fighting that guy who happened to be Nurmagomedov, and that fight was rumored to be scheduled for December. So the fact that an extra month was added to it, I'm a little surprised by the comment by Merab. It almost did sound like excuse-making, which is extremely uncommon for him. And if I was to go back and take their last 3 fights and see who got more takedowns and define that as the better wrestler, it was Merab 2-1. So I was a little surprised to think that Merab is going to be in a wrestling deficit here. I think, and Henry Cejudo found it out the hard way, he's an Olympic champion. He can wrestle. This guy can take you down.
Well, exactly. And we mentioned, like you said, with the 25 minutes, so it's crazy wrestling on both ends, and the potential to go a full 25 at that kind of pace. It feels like these are the only 2 guys in the division who could go head-to-head with those 2 specifics and make it kind of even.
And I think it's going to be fairly even in the wrestling. And then I think we find ourselves in a pretty exciting striking battle. And that's typically what happens. You get 2 really good grapplers, 2 really good wrestlers, and then neither one of them, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. We've seen it. Colby and Kamaru Usman. There wasn't a whole lot of wrestling happening because sometimes it's just not worth it. Can I get one? Maybe, but what am I going to have to expend to get that? And what's the consequences if he gets right back up? I think that those guys are going to be having that conversation back and forth in their head the entire time.
If you want to frustrate a wrestler, stop him from taking you down 5 times. If you stop him at any point in a contest, he will not try to take you down again. If you want to frustrate a wrestler, get up from the bottom 3 times, and he will quit trying to take you down. Just to Anthony's point, if you get on top You need a minute to take that breath. You got to hold him. You got to get a wrist. You got to kind of recharge that battery. And if there's scrambles, it doesn't happen, and then it turns into a dirty, rotten dogfight. And frankly, one thing that Dvalishvili does very well that's going to be a problem for Umar is he will crowd you. Merab will get right on you, and he's not necessarily as technical as much as he's just marching forward, but even somebody with beautiful striking like O'Malley had a hard time finding his range just because Merab's on you. He pushes you into the fence. He's gritty, makes it ugly. He's not as beautiful of a fighter. He should not be a 3-1 underdog. That's probably my ultimate point here.
No, that's fair. I know we have to move on to different things, but just quickly, they both told us how much striking work they've put in for this camp, because I think to your point, they believe that this could come down to striking. When you look at maybe both of their past performances, you see what they've done on the feet. Who do you feel like could potentially grow more and have the bigger benefit here in the striking matchup?
Oh, it's absolutely Umar, specifically in the kicking game. If he can keep it at that range, Chael makes a great point. You can have all these ideas that I'm going to keep my distance, I'm going to throw some nice kicks, I'm going to disrupt his timing, but if he's right in your face the entire time, that's the problem that O'Malley had. He couldn't get his strikes off because he couldn't get any distance or space. Now Umar's an incredible kicker. You could stand nose to nose with that guy and he could still kick you in the head. So I think he definitely has the striking advantage if we're talking just X's and O's.
Yeah, I just think the way Umar fights, particularly with one of his biggest weapons being a rear kick right to your mouth. He'll reach out and kick you in the knee like John Jones, or he'll just bring it all the way up and kick you right in the mouth like, say, Anderson famously did to Vitor. That becomes a big problem when a guy is right here, Megan. You got to have space for that.